Well, we're on an absolutely glorious day today, Tess. It's 17th of February today, and it's absolutely scorching hot in the greenhouse. It's actually 34 degrees in here, believe it or not. But it's still reasonably cold outside, and the ground is still wet, so I still can't get onto that. But I've got some more things to explain and show you. So, welcome to another episode of Jim's Lawn and Garden. Okay, so this is Mother Nature Part 10, and this is a carry-on from last time, and this is talking about the other varieties of ways of composting things. Now, in the last time I explained that there were 5 main ways of composting things. There's slow composting, there's normal garden composting, there's wormery, you know, sort of worm composting. There's leaf mould, you know, sort of making leaf mould, and there's also stewing. And in this section, what I want to talk about, basically the other 4 that I was talking about last time. So I'm talking about the long-term composting. I'm talking about the leaf mould. I'm talking about wormeries, and I'm talking about stewing. So to get started, slow composting is all about sort of long-term composting. This is where you're composting sort of wood, bark, things that take quite a while to break down. So we're talking about wood chippings and all these sorts of things. And this can take sort of 2 or 3 years. Now, from an environmental point of view, this isn't particularly good. And the reason for it is when wood, sort of brown matter, breaks down, it produces a lot of carbon dioxide and a lot of carbon monoxide, and this is they're both greenhouse gases, and what's happening is basically all of the carbon which is inside the wood, etc., which is mainly made up of, will then react with the oxygen within the air, and then that generates the carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, which will then go into the atmosphere. And so what you're left with really is considerably less, because you're you know, a lot of the carbon that you actually want to put into the ground is escaping from the composting to go into the atmosphere. So it's not a good way of doing things from an environmental point of view. And what I'm about to tell you is probably going to shock you, but from an environmental point of view, you are much better off to burn it. When you burn something, when you burn wood, a lot of the carbon which is in the wood, etc., will end up as elemental carbon, i.e. ash. So if you go into a woodland and you see all of these sort of logs breaking down and sort of rotting all over the place where trees are falling over, this is actually quite bad for the environment, because there's a lot of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide being given off from this. If you burn it, it's considerably better for the environment, because the elemental carbon will be left behind, which will then go back into the ground rather than going into the atmosphere. So there's considerably less carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide released when you burn wood than when you actually rot it down. So this is why burning wood is now seen as a green fossil fuel, or a you know, sort of green way of doing things. Apart from the fact that it's obviously renewable, it also releases considerably less greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So if you have got lots of sort of wood chippings, logs, hard prunings, sort of hedge trimmings and all that sort of thing, you are considerably better off to burn it, and then you can put that straight onto the ground as ash, rather than rotting it down over the space of 2 or 3 years in a sort of compost heap. So I would strongly recommend to everybody, from an environmental point of view, and also not wanting to have piles of compost everywhere in your allotment, because that's basically unusable ground whilst you're doing that, you're much better off to burn it and then put that straight onto the ground, and then where you would have potentially stored all of that whilst it was rotting down, to grow some vegetables there. So that's the best advice I can give you. Right, the next one, so that's slow composting, or sort of long-term composting. The next one I want to talk about is worm composting. Now, this is one of the fastest ways of composting things, and basically what it is, it produces a very highly fertile product, which are basically the worms, the drills that the worms sort of make. And there's two main ways of doing this. You can either have a wormery, and what you end up with is a liquid product. So basically what you'll need is a plastic container, ideally square, and I'll be doing this later on in the year. You can't do this yet because the temperature's too low, but if you start in the spring, all you need to do is put a layer of gravel in the bottom of the container. The reason you do this is you don't want the worms to be in the liquid which is formed at the bottom, because they'll drown. So what you need to do is have some gravel in the bottom. You can put some, you know, either gravel, or you can actually just put rubble in the bottom if you like. Obviously, if you're putting rubble in there, make sure you're not putting sort of concrete and stuff like that in there, because the lime out of that can sort of leach out into the, you know, into the liquid, and that will obviously increase the pH of the you know, the liquid that you're making. So I would suggest you put some shale or some hard stone gravel in you know, into the bottom, which has got a neutral pH. And then on top of that, what you need to do is put probably about 6 inches or so of straw. If you can't get straw, you could potentially put wood shavings, or you could put some leaves, which isn't really too much, it isn't particularly good. But if you can get hold of some bark or some straw, most certainly that's the best thing to do. Put a layer of about kind of 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches in the bottom, and then on top of that, what you want to do is put in a reasonable layer, say 6 inches of effectively kitchen waste. So all of your peelings, cuttings off, you know, any old fruit, banana skins, or obviously are always good, and all this type of thing. Then put that in there, and then what you need to do is introduce worms into it. Now, the worms that you can buy, there are a number of different worms that you can buy. These are readily available over the internet, or from garden, you know, a good garden centre will also stock these. And the basically the worms that you're looking for are either red brandling worms are a really good one to go for, or the striped tiger worm. I've seen both of these in action in the past. The red brandling worm is a particularly good one, and some of my friends on the allotment plot here, they swear by the red brandling worm, but the striped tiger worms are just as good, and you're much better off going for the smaller variety of worms. Don't go for the large ones, go for the smaller ones. The smaller ones tend to make a much quicker job of breaking everything down, and you know, and your wormery will work a lot better than that. And ideally, as I say, what you need to be putting in there is kitchen waste. So all the peelings and all the rest of it, put in there. And basically, what the worms will do is they'll start to, as soon as the temperature gets above kind of 15 degrees. So that's why you don't want to be doing it this time of year. If you have got a wormery already, what you want to be doing is covering it with some, you know, some insulating stuff to try and keep the temperature in there. The worms won't die unless it freezes. But their activity will most certainly be reduced if that's the case. And then basically store that in a you know, in a warmer place as possible. In a shed would be ideal, or you know, failing that inside your greenhouse or whatever, to try and you know, sort of keep it warm over the winter if you've got one going already. So as soon as you put all the stuff in there, the worms will start to eat through all the food matter, the kitchen waste and everything, and then they'll basically produce the worm drills and the sort of the liquid, which will go down to the bottom. This doesn't smell particularly sweet, to be honest with you, but it's ideal for the garden. And then what you need to be doing is with your pop bottles, which is obviously one of the uses, what you need to do is draining off the liquid into a bottle. Now, they're not particularly high maintenance, to be honest with you. What you need to do is obviously make sure there's plenty of food in there for the worms to go at, and you need to be sort of on at least a weekly basis, dependent on the size of your wormery, you need to be draining off the liquid into bottles. To make sure that, obviously, because if it fills with liquid, obviously the worms will drown and then they'll all sort of, die, and obviously that's not, the thing that you would really want to do. So what you need to be doing is sort of drain it off into bottles, and then you water that down, probably about anywhere between 6:1 to sort of 10:1, and then water that onto your plants, greenhouse, outside, wherever. Water it on, and then all of that goodness will then be going into the ground, and this is readily available nutrients for the plants, so obviously the plants will get that straight away, and they'll be able to grow that. So if you've not been able to put muck into the ground or anything like that, and you see that a crop is not growing quite as well as you'd like it to, putting this into the ground, sort of watering the crops with this is an ideal quick way of getting, and free way of getting nutrients into the ground for your plants to grow. Now, as I say, you've got a layer of straw and all the vegetable matter on there. After a certain amount of time, it'll sort of start to fill up to the top. As soon as it fills up to the top, what you need to do then is empty that into your compost heap or straight onto the ground or wherever, what's left. And then what you need to do is basically start again. So then what you do is drain it all out, get the worms out, obviously, and you can do that just with either a riddle or a sieve or something like that. Get your worms out, or most of the time you can just pick them out, to be honest with you. And they are quite pretty, the worms, to be honest with you. If you are a bit squeamish, obviously, but I typically just pull them out with my hands. And then, obviously, if the worms go into the ground, they're not going to cause any problems. They'll happily go off and do stuff on their own. They'll find their own food. But obviously, what you want to do is keep at least the majority of them inside your wormery, and then just start again. Put your straw in. Put 4 to 6 inches of straw in at the bottom. Obviously, you've still got your gravel in there, and then you want to put a couple of inches, a layer of your vegetable matter, and then just put the worms on top again, and then it'll all start again. Dependent on the size of your wormery, you might need to do this every 12 months, you might need to do it every couple of months. It depends on the size of it, but later on in the year, what I will be doing is making one of these on top of the water barrels over there, and as I do it, I'll actually show you. At this time of the year, it's too early, so I'll show you this later on. So in sort of May, June time, I'll put a wormery together so you can actually see it in process then. The worms aren't exactly expensive, but it's something that you only buy once. If you buy the worms, then obviously you just get them there, then off they go. And if you've got somebody on your allotment plots already with a wormery, they'll probably no doubt donate a few worms to you anyway, so you can do it that way. But as I say, if you order them over the internet or you go to a garden centre and buy them, they're not exactly expensive. But this is a really quick way of producing really highly fertile liquid fertiliser for anything, your greenhouse in particular, and obviously anything outside. So that's worming compost or a wormery. For a worming compost, obviously not a wormery, what you actually do is you just have a normal composting heap, like I explained in part 9 of Mother Nature, and then you just add the worms to that, and then just leave them to it. And what you'll find is they'll work their way through all of the compost and break it down a lot quicker for you. And they'll work alongside the microorganisms, the bacteria, and the mycorrhizal fungi that's in there. And the worms will just eat through that exactly like they are on the ground. So there's no real difference between that and a normal compost heap, but you just added worms and they'll eat through. You will find actually even if you just have a normal compost heap, you will find that worms will come out of nowhere. They'll come out of the ground and sort of work their way through there. So normally with a compost heap, if you got it on the ground, there'll be worms in there anyway. But you can introduce more worms on top of there to sort of eat their way through and help you with the composting process. So that's worming compost. Okay then, so moving on, the last two types of sort of composting as such. The first one is leaf mould, and the clue is in the word leaf mould. Basically what it is you gathering all the leaves together and place them, and you can do this in a number of ways. You can either drive 4 posts into the ground and then put chicken mesh, fine mesh all the way around, and then just pile your leaves in there, and then basically just leave them for 12 months. Bacteria, microorganisms are not involved in this process. This is all down to fungus or mould. And what the mould does, and it's naturally occurring, you don't need to introduce it, it's already on the leaves. What this will do is it'll break down the leaves into a very fine sort of compost type stuff, and it looks very much, it looks very much kind of like that when it's finished, you know, like normal compost that you buy in the shops. And this is ideal for putting in your greenhouse or for potting up plants and stuff like that. You need to add other things to it. So if you were to pot up if you were to make potting compost out of it, you'd probably need that, probably 2/3 of kind of that, and then mix that in with some loam out of the garden to give it some substance. So you know, you need some sand so it'll drain properly, because it can tend to hold the water a bit too much. So you need to put some soil in there. So probably 2/3 leaf mould, 1/3 soil, and then I'd also add in there some more fertile stuff, like either normal compost. Add that in there, not too much. You know, depends on what you're potting up, or you can also put in there some organic fertilizers, things like hawthorn and blood, fish meal, you know, just to give it the nutrients. Obviously that's a slow release, so you'd use that kind of potting compost to grow things, you know, for long term. If you've got like you know, something in a pot for a year or so, then that's, you know, obviously that's where that fertilizer comes in. If it's short term stuff, so you're just growing up seedlings and stuff like that, obviously hawthorn and blood and fish meal isn't the right thing to use. What you need to be doing is adding things like coffee, things like more compost, so you know you've got the more readily available minerals there, or just going back to your wormery, just water them with the liquid that you're getting from the wormery, obviously watered down. So to make leaf mould, it's quite simple. Basically, you place, if you haven't got a framework, so 4 posts in the ground with some mesh, that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is basically just get the leaves, put them into a black bag. Basically what you're going to do is starve it of light, and then basically just put the bag, don't tie it up, you need a little bit of air to get in there, and you need a bit of moisture in there as well, obviously, to start it all off. And then basically just put it all in the black bag, and then put the black bag somewhere out of the way, up the side of the shed, or you know, just one quiet corner of your allotment where you're not using it, and then just basically leave them for around 12 months, and then over that 12 months, the mould and the fungus will break down the leaf matter in there, and it'll break it down into a fibrous, as I've just shown you, matter that you can use. Now, ideally, it can also be used as a mulch. It's really good. The thing you need to think of is it's really good for holding moisture in. So if you want to mulch the ground, so you know, if you want to put it around your strawberries, or if you want to put it around your raspberries, or you know any kind of plant that you want to mulch, it's good for that. It's very high in carbon. So plants that you've got that need a lot of carbon, things like hardwood, sort of things like raspberries, like you know, bushes, trees, they need a high carbon content within the ground. It's ideal for those, and as I say, all you need to do is put it in a bag and keep it in a dark, damp place, and all the mould and the fungus will do the rest of it for you. So don't throw leaves away, don't burn them, gather them all up in a bag, put them away. Apart from things like strawberry, you know, the remains of a strawberry, always burn them, because there's some disease in there. So basically, obviously, anything with composting or leaf mould or anything like that, always used undiseased matter. Don't put disease in there, because when you introduce it back onto the garden, you're spreading the disease around the garden. So always make sure that the leaves aren't diseased in any way. Strawberries I'd avoid. That's probably the only thing really. Strawberries, I wouldn't really put raspberry leaves in there either, to be honest with you. But any leaves from deciduous trees, stay away from pine trees, spurs, you know, Alicante type bushes. Stay away from them, because they don't rot down particularly well, and there's a lot of oils and stuff in there. But anything like, you know, deciduous British trees like oak, you know, sort of anything like that. Conker trees, you know, the horse chestnut tree and all the rest of it. Any leaves like that are ideal. Get them in a bag, you know, and then loosely put the top on the bag. Make sure there's a bit of moisture in there. Put them up a quiet time. 12 months time, you got yourself a bag of potentially compost. Saves you going out and buying it. The last one that I want to quickly talk about is stewing. This isn't really composting as such. It kind of is, because you're breaking down the matter in leaves and stuff. But basically, what you would do is you would grow a particular plant, and basically what you do is you grow a sacrificial plant, and this is mainly in Britain at least, this is mainly comfrey which is used, which is I believe it's a herb. And basically you grow comfrey, and every couple of months what you do is you harvest the comfrey. So basically just with a sickle go along and chop the top off, and then you gather all of that green matter together, put that into again like a box, like a wormery. The black boxes that you can get from most shops, you know, they're a couple of quid, they're ideal. And basically put a little tap on the bottom of it, leave it in there, and they'll break down in there. Just put a tile on the top to weight it down, and they'll break down in their own juice. You might need to put a little bit of water in there just to start it off, to be honest with you. And as that breaks down, it'll produce liquid fertiliser, just like your wormery would, which is typically high in nitrogen. And then basically, again, obviously there's no worms in there. You don't need to worry about drowning worms. You can leave that in there. They do tend to stink, to be honest with you. It's not a pleasant smell, but the stuff that you get off it is like nectar to plants. You know, you can water your tomatoes, or plant outside. It is nitrogen rich, but you have also got the other, the potassium, the phosphates, and all the rest of it in there to help. But it is particularly nitrogen rich. So anything that you're eating the leaves of, things like brassicas, spinach, plants that you're eating the leaves of, it's ideal for that. Water it up the row. And it's really good for that. And it's basically brewing the green leaves in water. You just put a little teeny bit of water in there, and then basically that'll start to break down. You don't need a lot of water, because a lot of the water will come from the leaves, but obviously you need to keep it damp. So basically what I would suggest you do is put a tile on top of them, weight them down, and then just cover it over to stop the water from evaporating, and then just leave them in there for, I don't know, a month or two, and then you'll start to be able to drain the liquid off. And other plants that you can use in there, you can also use nettles. Nettles are very high in quite a few of the minerals. Obviously you can make tea to drink out of nettles as well. So I always think of it, anything you can make tea out of is good for sort of stewing up for plants. You do need to be careful, because certain plants will give you a reasonably high acidic fertiliser. Nettles are slightly acidic. Comfrey is reasonably neutral, but you can get an acidity from it. So if you're using quite a lot of it to water your plants, you need to make sure that your ground doesn't become too acidic. And as I say, it's an ideal formula for watering your your tomatoes. So rather than going out and buying, I don't know, Tomarite or whatever, the tomato feeds, you can make your own. You know it's organic. All you need is a little area, and you don't need a lot of comfrey to do this, because just a sort of like a 2 foot square patch of comfrey is more than enough to be able to to do this. And comfrey, you need to be cutting it before it goes to flower. So as soon as you see any buds forming on the comfrey, you most certainly, you're probably too late to cut it down at that point. Next week's episode is going to be all about reliance on water, and how we can effectively reduce our dependency on water by how we prepare the ground and how we plant various crops, and also talking about irrigation systems, how we can get more water in effectively into the garden, and also how we can remove any unwanted water. So next week, one of the episodes is going to be all about water and how we can control it better within the allotment. So, I hope this episode has been of some use to you. Please do put your comments, subscribe below. I appreciate any comments or questions that you might have, and I'll always get back to you with any answers. As I say, I hope this episode has been of use to you and of interest. And I'll see you on the next edition of Jim's Allotment Garden.